Shaping the way we teach English. Webinar Wednesday.
Hello everyone! Welcome to Shaping the Way We Teach English Webinar Course 13, brought to you by the American English team. This is Heather Benucci, also known as Moderator Heather, and I'm very excited to introduce today's webinar. Here you can see we still have one session left, a great session on fostering autonomy on July 9th. That will be our last session in Course 13. And I think most of you are webinar veterans now. You know the answer to this question, how we can participate in the webinar today. During the session, you're going to hear but not see the presenter, and the way for you to participate is by using the chat box, just as you are now where you're making your introductions. This is where you can ask questions or make comments related to today's topic. Of course, we can't answer every question during today's session, as there's often hundreds of great teachers participating. However, there is another place to continue our discussions, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Your presenter may also ask you questions in the form of polls, and these are multiple choice questions that will appear on the screen for you to answer. Some people may experience technical problems, and unfortunately, we can't fix individual issues, but we will let you know if we're having a global issue. If you do lose sound, a great way to follow along with the presentation is to use the caption pod you see at the bottom of the screen. Webinar courses consist of 6 webinars, and during the course, webinars take place every other Wednesday. And those of you who attend at least 4 out of 6 webinars will receive an e-certificate from the Regional English Language Officer, our local U.S. Embassy where you registered for the course. Please direct all questions related to e-certificates to your local contact. To make sure that you are eligible for your e-certificate, we will take your attendance information at the very end of the webinar. We will let you know when to do this and how to do this. Please do not submit this information before we request it, or we will not count it. If you are an individual participating on your own computer, we'll just need your email at the end of the session. And for viewing hosts who are viewing with a group of teachers, we will need the host's email address and the total number of participants attending. Again, we'll let you know when to submit this information. And at this point, most of you are familiar with our naming site, but if you haven't registered yet, please do. It's a great way to continue the discussions about each webinar topic, to interact with your colleagues from around the world, and to get access to additional teaching resources. On the Ning, we will post pre-webinar resources, as you've probably seen for this session. And there will also be post-webinar discussions as well as the session recordings and the PowerPoint presentations for each webinar session. And finally, as always, we encourage you to visit our website, americanenglish.state.gov, where we host a wide range of resources for teachers and learners of English. Okay, on to today's session. Today we're going to examine the power of positive language. Our students often focus on their challenges and weaknesses rather than their strengths. By reframing our language in the classroom to focus on what is positive, our students can increase their confidence and feel accomplished in their learning, which can result in higher motivation and success. This webinar will give teachers tools for changing language in the classroom to encourage positive learning outcomes. It's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Sally White. Sally has an MA in TESOL from the School for International Training in Brattleboro, Vermont. She currently teaches with Into CSU, the intensive English program at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. Sally has served as an English language fellow in Hungary, teaching English to Roma and Gypsy University students, and in Kyrgyzstan, where she trained English teachers throughout the country. She's also taught English in Connecticut, Montana, Vermont, California, and South Africa. Sally's areas of expertise are teaching oral communication and pronunciation, intercultural communication and conflict transformation, community building, and materials and curriculum development. Prior to working in the TESOL field, Sally also worked in the field of outdoor education as a wilderness instructor. That sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, so I'm going to start the session now, but before you hear Sally speak, you're going to hear some music. And as you listen, think about the lyrics and how they relate to today's webinar. So let's get started and get ready to listen.
You got to accentuate positively, might to negative, like charm, to the affirmative. Don't mess with Mr. In Between.
Hi everyone, this is moderator Heather. We're working on the sound issue. Please be patient for just a moment and we will reconnect the sound. Thank you. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, great. So I'm not sure where I got cut off. Good morning, everyone, and good evening to many of you. I am talking to you from beautiful Fort Collins, Colorado, and I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, which is Reframing, the Power of Positive Language. The song you just heard is an old song called Accentuate the Positive, which is exactly what we are going to do together today. So let's go ahead and get started. The objectives for today are to introduce reframing and its relevance to teaching and learning. So how does it relate to us as teachers and our students as learners? I'll give some background on related information regarding how we learn best. Some of this is related to brain-based learning and having more joy in the classroom. We're going to practice with reframing, so we'll do some exercises, activities to get a chance to practice ourselves. And we'll look at some lessons or activities that encourage positivity. And throughout the webinar, I'll also be sharing some resources with you. So, where can we use reframing? Well, reframing relates not only to our professional lives as teachers and students, but also to our personal lives. It's a way of thinking about the world that may or may not be different from your current way of thinking about the world. The focus is on creating a positive outlook, and one way we do this is through language.
So what kind of language do we use to promote this positive atmosphere? We use positive language, of course. And what is positive language? So we're going to have a poll now. Go ahead and look at this question and decide for yourselves which of these words are positive. So we have patient, impatient, can, can't, and crisis. And I'll give you a couple minutes to do this. Okay, so it looks like the majority of people see patient and can as positive words, impatient, can't, and crisis as negative words. So keep these in mind. I think most people would agree with the results of the poll. Let's go ahead and go back to the presentation. We'll talk more about how to use positive language later in the webinar. For now, let's talk about why. So why does it make a difference? Why does it matter if we use positive or negative language? It matters because how we feel affects how much and how effectively we learn. And we'll talk more about that later too. First, I want to review the pre-webinar questions. We started out with a couple of questions. So the first one, when you think about the atmosphere in your classroom, which of these words best describe that atmosphere? So we had about 83–84% positive, about 14% neutral, and maybe almost 3% who weren't sure. And there are no right or wrong answers to this question. It's more to raise awareness and spark some thought about what we do in our classroom and how we relate to our students. So just something to think about, and then probably by the end of the webinar, this will have more meaning for you. Let's look at the next question. So if you took a 50-point exam and got 40 correct answers and 10 incorrect answers, would you rather see your score as +40 or -10? And from our poll, it looked like in the high 80 percentages, about 87% would rather see +40, and about 12% -10. And again, there's no right answer. So this question, it's more from the perspective of a student, and we've all been students. It looks like the majority of people would rather hear the more positive outcome. So think about what it feels like to have the focus on how many answers we got right instead of how many answers we got wrong. Okay, so I mentioned that how we feel affects how we learn. Well, let's take a look at the physiological effects of a positive learning environment. There's research that indicates that students retain what they learn when the learning is associated with strong positive emotion. Positive emotion relaxes the amygdala, which is the part of the brain where memories are first formed. And when the amygdala is relaxed, information can be integrated. There are open pathways for new information to get in and find a place to live in the brain. So it's ideal if you have a relaxed atmosphere, positive energy. So this is a comic. Let's read it first and then tell me what you think. The human brain is a wonderful thing. It starts working the moment you are born and never stops until you stand up to speak in public. So raise your hand if this sounds like you. It is funny, huh? And it's also a little bit true. So why is that? Why for so many of us does it feel like our brain stops working when we get up to speak in public? Well, there are reasons. And the reasons are that some emotions stop us from learning. So what stops us from learning? Well, stress, anxiety, embarrassment, anger, and other negative emotions. Boredom, feeling disrespected. These emotions can interfere with learning. When we feel negative emotions, the amygdala is overactivated and learning is blocked. So things aren't flowing very well in this case. And we call this the affective filter. Maybe you're familiar with that. So, what can we do? Well, there's a lot we can do. And today I'm going to share some ideas for promoting positivity and one tool that helps us maintain a positive environment in our classrooms. And that tool is reframing. So let's take a look at some examples and we can practice together. So this word crisis, a few minutes ago, I asked you to decide whether the word crisis is a positive or a negative word. It looked like most of you thought the word was negative, which in English, the word crisis has a negative connotation. So when we use it, we usually think of bad things. In the Chinese language, however, the word opportunity, which is seen as a positive word in English, is said to be included in the understanding of crisis. Do you see how just changing the word changes the feeling about it? If a crisis brings opportunity, there's a chance for a new beginning, possibilities to learn, and so on. Okay, we're going to play with some words now. So here is our first example. The word problem. It sounds like, well, it sounds like a problem, which is a negative thing. It stops us. If we have a problem, we stop. We don't know what to do, right? So, aha. One option, and I see somebody has typed that in, if we instead call it a challenge, we're invited to meet the challenge, to go forward, to attempt to overcome the challenge. So this gives it a more positive feel and allows us, or invites us, really, to move through it. What about this one? Mistake. We've all made mistakes, right? Let's think about this in terms of language learning. What is the result of making a mistake? What happens when we make a mistake when we're learning a language? Sure. We learn a lesson. We have an opportunity to learn. That's right, and we've all had this experience, right? You make a mistake, you get to learn, and often everyone else who's around you gets to learn as well. So really a nice opportunity to learn. Okay, so now we're going to have a question about the word disruptive. So if a student is disruptive, how can we talk about that student in a more positive way? And there's a poll for you here. Choose which of these three words you like best to frame the word disruptive. Okay, so there's a mix here. It looks like the majority of you like energetic. Some people would choose enthusiastic. Some people would choose lively. So again, these are all good reframes for disruptive. So you see, reframing, it's not a science, it's an art. There is more than one way to reframe words, sentences, ideas into more positive options. So keep that in mind as we're going through this and beyond the webinar as well. So let's go ahead and go back to the slides. How about impatient? Which reframe do you like best for impatient? Keen, eager, excited. Again, there's a mix on this. Most people seem to like eager or excited. A few people like keen, and it's personal preference, really. These are all good reframes for impatient. Because when you think about a student that's impatient, really, they're ready, right? They are keen, they're eager, they're excited, they want to be involved. So it's a really nice way to make a more positive twist on this idea of impatience. Okay, thank you, Heather. A little review here. All right, what about a weak student? I've heard many students and teachers refer to a weak student. It sounds like a condition that somebody can't help. Can you think of another way to think about this student? Weren't we all so-called weak students at one point? So what does it mean? According to Malcolm Gladwell, who is a well-known Canadian journalist and author, the key to success is practicing something, almost anything, for around 10,000 hours. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of hours, and it is, but keep in mind he's focusing on Olympic athletes, professional musicians, professional athletes. These people have had a lot of time to work on their skills and develop them. My point is that just because you don't have as much experience with a skill as another person, it doesn't mean that you are weak. It just means that you have less experience and you have probably put in less time. Yes, a developing student. Think about some ways to reframe weak so that it's not negative. Go ahead and type some more ideas into the chat box. Full of potential. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Improving, sure. Thanks, Mubarak. So lots of good contributions here. Great. So developing again. Great. These are good suggestions. Okay. So we've looked at a few single words and had a little practice with reframing. Now let's look at some negative statements that students might make and see if we as teachers can decide on language that makes them more positive. So we're going to have a more complex poll now. This is a matching activity. So you see these examples. There are 5 statements that students might have made, and there are 5 opportunities for teachers to reframe these statements. Now, these are not matched up appropriately, so you're going to have the opportunity here to match them. And go ahead and choose a more positive statement for the original statement. Take your time to think about it. If you're with other people, check in with them. You'll need to scroll down to see all the options. Great, take a few minutes. This is sort of a complex poll. Okay, so looking at number 1, my classmate is too disruptive. Remember when we talked about disruptive, what were some of the options for reframing disruptive that were appropriate? So if we look through here, you have the choices: big chance to learn, cautious, thorough, enthusiasm and energy, and a useful challenge. So a couple of the words that we used when we reframed disruptive were these ideas of enthusiasm and energy, right? So think about matching specifically to the question. And again, number 2, problem, that's the key word there. This class is a real problem for me. What did we talk about with reframing problem? Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the matches. We'll go back to the slides, and you'll be able to view the answers, the reframes next to the statements. So number 1, thanks for all your efforts, everyone. My classmate is too disruptive, so that means you have a big chance to learn. Oh my. I'm on the wrong slide. So that was a mismatch. My classmate is too disruptive. I can see he has a lot of enthusiasm and energy, right? Number 2, this class is a real problem for me because this can be a useful challenge. Number 3, I made a big mistake, and that means you have a big chance to learn. And if a student says, I'm way too slow, well, you are being thorough. I'm such a coward. You are simply cautious, which is not a bad thing at all. So remember, though, there could be some overlap in answers. For example, the response to this class is a real problem for me could be this can be a useful challenge, or it could be that means you have a big chance to learn. These are both appropriate responses depending on your focus. They're both more positive than the original statements. Alrighty, so if you have been sitting this whole time, now might be a good time to get up for a minute and stretch and re-energize. We're going to do this twice during the webinar. Here's your first chance. Just go ahead and take a little break. It might seem crazy like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Come along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Okay. Hope everyone's feeling better now, more energized. So go ahead and sit back down and settle in. We're going to transition now. We went from practicing with reframing single words to a matching activity. And now we'll do some practice with reframing sentences with our own ideas. I'll give you an example to start. Here's a sentence that students might say, right? I'm hopeless at remembering phrasal verbs. And we can all certainly understand why students might feel this way. Phrasal verbs are very challenging. So when you look at this sentence, what do you see that makes it negative? Hopeless. Right, I see hopeless. Denise. Yutaka, hopeless. That makes it look negative, doesn't it? Okay, yes, phrasal verbs are a real challenge for a lot of people. It's true. So here are a couple of examples for reframing this statement. I need more practice with phrasal verbs. Okay, I need a good strategy for remembering phrasal verbs. And yes, phrasal verbs are a real challenge for me. Good, these are all more positive, right? It gives hope. Now, notice for this example, I didn't need to change much of the sentence structure to change the meaning. When you're reframing, think about the ideas behind the sentence rather than focusing on the grammar. How about I don't get enough attention from the teacher. And there are lots of ways to reframe this. Here's one example. The teacher trusts me to do my work. So this is an example of a sentence that is reframed in a way that changes the structure of the sentence in order to make it positive. See how the negative idea of the first statement gets transformed into a positive idea in the second one. I should participate more in class. Ishtiaq, great. So lots of good ideas for reframing this. Minshan, I can do my work without teachers monitoring. Absolutely. Great, good suggestions, good reframes. So we're going to do another one here. My questions are holding everyone up. What are some ways to reframe this statement to make it positive? Write your reframes in the chat box. Let's see what we have here. My questions are holding everyone up. So in these examples, these are statements students might make, or they might write in a journal or something, and these are, as teachers, we're helping reframe these for our students. So the positive reframes do come from the teachers in this case. My questions make everyone think, Iana. There's a good reframe for this, right? Because you're asking a lot of questions. It is an opportunity for everyone else to stop and think about the questions. So again, my questions are holding everyone up. That is the student statement. And then my questions are getting us all to think is an example of how the teacher would respond. So we're going to go to the next one. Here is another student response. If a student says, I'm too old to learn English, how could a teacher respond to that? Or how could this be reframed? Learning takes a whole life. Right. We're always learning continuously. Great reframe. Lifelong learning. Yeah, I have experience. There's no end, right? We all know. We're not too old to learn something new. Okay, so now we're going to do a reframing brainstorm. I'm going to give you some instructions, so please wait to hear the instructions before you type into the chat boxes. This activity will require some patience. So step one is to take a couple of minutes to think of something negative you have thought or that you have heard a teacher or student say or write related to a class or a learning experience. So take a couple minutes to think, and then you can go ahead and type into the chat box on the left of your screen. So what will happen is there will be 3 other chat boxes. Please wait for instructions before you type into those. We're going to choose 3 of your examples, and then we are going to ask you to practice reframing them. Wait until I say go before you write your reframing ideas. So we've got some examples here. So your ideas, something negative you have heard, or so you have thought, or you've heard a teacher or student say in the box on the left, related to a class or a learning experience. So your handwriting is terrible. I see a lot of examples here. So we've got, now that we have our 3 negative statements on the right, go ahead and type your suggestions into the appropriate chat boxes on the right. Go. I'll give you some time to do this. If you're alone, brainstorm all you want. If you're with other people, work together as a team to reframe the negative statements into more positive language. Actually, you're all working as a team anyway. So we have, I always make mistakes. I don't need to learn English. I don't use English. And stupid students, you never take enough time to revise your notes. Goodness, these are all negative. And I see some reframing, making these positive statements. Jackie, you should take more time to revise your notes. It's more positive. You never know when you will need it. Sure. Making mistakes is always good. You practice hard and you'll learn. You are in a global world. English is necessary to communicate. If not, you are out of the world. A good reframe for number 2. I don't need English. Learning a new language broadens your mind. Good response as well. I don't need to learn English. Sophia from Russia, scanning your notes helps the brain to process the information. And in response again to number 3, Lucia says, checking your notes doubles your opportunity to learn. I always make mistakes. You are just learning. Right. These are much more positive. And Anna responded, it is only by making mistakes that you learn. That's so true. We all know that from experience, don't we? Not always easy. It is true. Mistakes are the steps to success. By making mistakes, we learn. Great. Wonderful participation in this. Wonderful contributions. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch back. Thank you so much for your participation and following instructions. Well done. So we'll skip through. We did this. Are you feeling more positive now? Go ahead and raise your hand if you got some good practice with reframing and some good suggestions from other participants that gave you ideas to work with. Great. Nice. Okay. Now, we'll look at some options for activities that incorporate positivity into the learning. There are many resources for finding activities and lessons such as these, and some of those resources are listed on the name, so you have access to those. I realize that we're all in different teaching situations and that some of us have very restricted curricula to follow. So you might be thinking that your limitations prevent you from including activities such as these in your teaching, and yet I'm going to introduce you to some very short activities that you could include to encourage more positivity in your classroom. Additionally, remember that you can foster a positive environment in your classroom by the way you speak with your students, the way you give them feedback, the way you guide them to use language, both written and spoken. So it's a really powerful tool. Something else I want to add before we look at these activities is that although some of them have very basic language, all of them are rich culturally, and any of them can be adapted to fit for a more advanced class. So keep that in mind when we're looking at them. I'll start with a few 10-minute warm-ups that you might be able to begin your class with, end your class with, or even build your lessons around. And you'll notice that the theme is positivity. So the first activity is one you could use at the start of a new course with new students, or you could use it any time to bring more joy into the classroom. As we look at these activities, feel free to type your ideas for adaptations into the chat box so we all learn from each other. So in this one, students walk around and greet each other with a big smile, and when someone greets you, answer, "I'm great, wonderful, super." And you give a big smile back. So the language focus here is on greetings, and something to keep in mind is cultural appropriateness. And by that I mean, it's not okay in every culture to smile at strangers on the street. This activity incorporates English language culture. You have to make sure your students understand that we practice these customs and this language to interact in English language settings. So in the US and other English language cultures, people do smile at you on the street, in shops, everywhere really, and it's useful for our students to know this. So if they study abroad or do business in English language cultures or have interactions with English language speakers, they'll be prepared to interact appropriately. So just be aware of that. So this one can be really quick. It can even be a ritual for the start of each class. It's called Circle of Compliments, and so in groups, we think of a compliment for each person. And here are some examples. That's a really nice scarf, cool jacket, you're so nice. So each person gets a compliment, and when you receive a compliment, you say thank you. When you finish, remember and report each compliment. Serena said, "I look great today." Murat said, "I asked good questions in class." And let's stop what we're doing right now and practice giving a compliment. So if you're with other people, go ahead and compliment the person to your left. You might have to wait a minute if that person is giving a compliment to the person on their left, but that's okay. If you're alone, compliment yourself out loud. "I look fabulous today," and it will probably make you smile. So the language focus here is compliments and reported speech. So again, remember, you need to consider cultural norms. Compliments in English language cultures are common, and yet there are differences between appropriate compliments and inappropriate compliments. If you are unsure, it's safest to stick to compliments about personality and skills rather than complimenting physical appearance. For example, instruct students to compliment each other on working hard or being on time or being creative, and not on their clothing or physical attributes. You have to know your students and their level of understanding of what is culturally appropriate. But to be safe, compliment on personality and skills is the way to go. Okay, this next activity, My Family, is an activity that focuses on family, which we probably all know that taking time for family and friends helps us be happier people. And this activity incorporates drawing, which is great for involving visual and kinesthetic elements into the learning. So students draw a simple picture of their family, and of course we don't need to be artists to be able to do that. Write something nice about each person, and then students tell a partner about their family and listen to their partner talk about his or her family. You look at each other's pictures and repeat the information back to your partner, ask questions, and then you can rotate around, change partners, and you learn about each other by doing this, and it's enjoyable. So the language focus here can be descriptive adjectives. Okay, so this next activity is Good Things Right Now. It's a focus on the positive things in life. So you think about 3 good things in your life right now. Examples: it's sunny today. I'm meeting my sister after class. I feel great today. You share your sentences with the partner and comment on each other's good things. You can change partners and keep sharing the goodness. And notice that these activities also have extensions. For example, homework could be to notice 3 good things every day and report to the class, or write in a journal. The language focus here, present simple and other verb tenses, describing current situations and plans. So let's all think of 1 good thing in our lives right now and write in the chat box. I am in good shape today. I feel happy. From Nurguz. I'm on vacation. Well, thank you for joining us on your vacation. I feel comfortable today. These are great. We all have good things if we think about it. Okay, I am blessed. All right, we'll move on to the next one. My top 5. This is another quick one, focusing on the good things in life, and this includes the past. So you think back. What have been the 5 best things in your life this year? Share with a partner, ask each other questions, and then you change partners and keep sharing. Again, another extension, try thinking of 5 good things every week and notice how you feel. So now we'll look at some activities that are, or can be a little longer, maybe easier to expand on, depending on your objectives and your time. So the purpose of this is to encourage students to focus on the positive things in life, and students in groups, they come up with and write positive, empowering questions. For example, what was special about today? What am I really good at? What am I looking forward to? And then students look at all of the questions and individually write down the ones that most appeal to them and share answers with the group. So the language focus here is creating questions, past, present, and future. And an extension of this could be to suggest the students hang these questions on their wall at home and ask them and answer them every day. Transfer this positivity from the classroom to the world outside. Here's another one, 5 things in common, and this is to help learners raise awareness of the many things they can already do and reinforce their belief in their abilities. So we want to reinforce positive beliefs. Students make a list of all the things they can do, anything. So here's some examples, and certainly people would have more than 3. I can skateboard, I can cook lentil soup, I can read a book in English, and so on. And then in groups, students get together and they try to find 5 things in common that they can all do. And when they find the 5 things, they shout out, "We can all play chess, we can all skateboard," whatever it is. And the language focus here is can. This next activity is to raise awareness of students' strengths as language learners, and it helps students learn new strategies by talking with and learning from each other. This is a very interactive activity for students. We start by having students brainstorm aspects of learning and using a new language. So the example in the box below includes writing, vocabulary, listening, spelling, all of the things that are involved in learning a new language. And then next, students will choose for themselves 2 or 3 that they are good at and make notes about why they are good at those things. So they're going to be writing their strategies for how they learn and improve these skills. And then students find others who share the same skill strengths and discuss strategies, learn from each other. Then they can share with the whole group what their strategies are. So the language focus here is describing strategies, good at, ing, gerund. Other extensions of this activity are to have students prepare information sheets to help each other with learning strategies. We could also pair students together, some who are good at something and some who would like to learn new strategies to become better. So we have students as teachers and learners. Guess what? Time for another stretch. So here's an invitation. Take a minute to just get up and stretch.
You might say, crazy, what I'm about to say. Sunshine is here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like happiness is the truth.
Okay, so hope you have some more energy now. I hope you did get up and actually stretch. It's good for our bodies to do that, especially when we're learning. So we just looked at some examples of lesson ideas to encourage a more positive focus and bring more positive energy into the classroom. And I mentioned belief when we looked at the 5 things in common activity with a focus on can. So next we're going to talk about belief, and we're going to start this with a quote. This quote is by Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Henry Ford, as you may know, was the founder of the Ford Motor Company and a successful American industrialist. His quote is based on belief, which is what we will talk about now. So beliefs. Beliefs are important. To be successful, you have to know what you want and believe that it is possible, right? Beliefs determine your possibilities. What you believe about yourself makes the difference in what you do and choose not to do. And it makes the difference in what you are good at and what you will try hard to do. And beliefs may become habits. We don't always think about our beliefs because they're deep inside. So when we're working with students on beliefs, sometimes it's good to give some examples. And I have an example of something that relates to beliefs. It's a story. So this is an example of a story that encourages us to think and can invite some lively discussion. So sit back and relax while I read you this story. It's okay if you have heard it before. How often do you get a chance to sit back and enjoy listening to a story? I know how busy we are as teachers, so probably not very often. So just relax. This is a story featuring Asclepius, the god of medicine from Greek mythology. Asclepius and the Two Travelers. Once Asclepius was walking in the countryside outside Athens when he met a traveler. "Excuse me," said the man. "I'm going to Athens, and I've never been there before. Have you any idea what it is like?" "Where have you come from?" asked Asclepius. "Piraeus," said the traveler. "Well, what is it like there?" asked Asclepius. "Oh, it's a dreadful place," said the man. "Well, I expect you'll find Athens just the same," said Asclepius. "Oh dear," said the man, and he went on his way. A short time later, Asclepius met another traveler. "Excuse me," said the second man. "I'm going to Athens, and I've never been there before. Have you any idea what it is like?" "Where have you come from?" asked Asclepius. "Piraeus," said the traveler. "Well, what is it like there?" asked Asclepius. "Oh, it's a wonderful place," said the man. "Well, I expect you'll find Athens just the same," said Asclepius. "Oh, good," said the man, and he went on his way. So, how do you think this relates to beliefs? What could students learn from this story? As language teachers, there is so much we can do with stories in lessons. We can make the story come alive through having students act it out to practice with fluency. We can work with the verb tenses or quoted speech. We can have discussions about the ideas and share our understanding, our opinions, and our beliefs. So much. We can ask our students, which character are you and why? Stories generate so many possibilities for learning language and culture. And this story definitely relates to beliefs and how they influence our lives. So here is an example of an activity that involves our students in looking at their own language, which is shaped by their beliefs. And remember that often we believe the words we say, and also that negative beliefs can create negative emotions, which prevent us from learning. So to think about changing negative beliefs to positive beliefs, we can choose liberating alternatives. So it's sort of like freeing us from our negative beliefs. And in this activity, we're helping our students try to reframe for themselves. So we could remind students about Henry Ford's quote. And then in this next slide, you'll see we're going to have students match the limiting belief with the liberating alternative. And a language focus here can be pronunciation related, so using emphasis and stress to qualify what someone has said. So here we go. Here's the first one. We'll do this all together. So my pronunciation is so bad. If a student said this, we could respond or have them respond. I need to work on my overall pronunciation. I do pronounce some things well. So what we're doing here is we're guiding our students to try and shift their beliefs through their language that they choose. That first statement is really negative. I'm stupid. And to this, we might encourage them to say, I've made some mistakes, and that's part of learning. I can't write essays. I'm still learning to write essays. I get better with every draft. I'm not good at grammar. How can we encourage our students to reframe that? I didn't understand that concept, so I struggled with that exercise. I can get help and improve. These are just some examples. You could also modify this activity to make the statements more general, or if you prefer not to use this as an activity, just use this skill individually with students when you notice them using limiting language. I've had a lot of opportunities to help students liberate themselves from limiting beliefs. And since I want my students to have as much success as they possibly can, I do guide them to reframe. Most of the statements I have heard are like the statements listed in the examples. I'm bad at grammar, I'm bad at writing. I've heard these a lot. So I ask them, are you bad at everything related to writing? Usually they can think of something they do well, topic sentences, or even remembering to capitalize the first letters of sentences. And then we build on that. So try to find something positive and then build from that. Also, keep in mind that beliefs can become habits. So students might repeat negative statements about themselves even after we have guided them to reframe. If we continue to remind them, it could make a difference, at least in their awareness, which is the first step to change. So, failure is something that can influence our beliefs, and failure has a negative connotation. However, if we look at many successful people throughout history, we know that failure can just be a part of the process. And we can think of this process as failing forward. So we're going to take a poll now. And I'm going to ask you approximately how many times did Thomas Edison fail before succeeding with the light bulb? There are famous stories about him and his invention of the light bulb. Do you think it's 1, 10, 100, 1,000? Okay, so we have about half of you think 100, half of you think 1,000. Believe it or not, it is 1,000. And let's go ahead and go back to the screen. That is a lot of failures, but without those failures, he wouldn't have succeeded. Each failure brought him closer to success, and it's the same for our students. If they fail an assignment or an exam, it's not the end, it's the place from which to begin again. We fail forward. And our failures, really, they're gifts. They give us feedback. They give us information we need to make changes and try again. So here's an activity you can do that illustrates this idea of failure as a part of the road to success. It can help our students realize that many successful people had some challenges by failing along the way. So again, the purpose is to reassure students that failing is part of the path to success. And what we can do here is write the names or display pictures of these people on the board. You can choose other people from anywhere in the world. And even if you choose people who are less famous, you could extend this to be a research project. But for this example, I've chosen Albert Einstein, J.K. Rowling, Thomas Edison, and Nelson Mandela. So now we have students say as much as they can about these people and why they are or were famous. And then in groups, students match each of these statements with one of the people. So let's do this. A, this person spent 26 years in prison. So if you look at the names at the bottom of the slide, who would match up with that? Yes, Yana, Nelson Mandela. Yes, a lot of people recognize Nelson Mandela was the person who spent 26 years in prison. B, this person failed approximately 1,000 times before his invention succeeded. You've all had a little clue for this one, so it could be easy. Thomas Edison. Right, his light bulb took at least 1,000 tries. C, this person's math teacher thought he was useless. Einstein. Hard to believe, really. Okay, and since that leaves D, this person's book was rejected 12 times before being accepted by a publisher. Yes, huge I, J.K. Rowling. And she, of course, is the author of the Harry Potter books, which are extremely popular books. Alrighty, so there's a way for matching. If you want to use this, you could write these names and the sentences on strips of paper and have people walk around and match. You could put the names on the backs of students and have other people help them figure out who they are. Lots of things you can do here. So the next step is to ask students if they can think of other successful people who might have failed on their way to success. So do our students know who they have as examples of successful people that have failed? It could be local people, it could be somebody in their family. And then ask students what they might be able to learn from these examples. And then ask students if they can relate these examples to their own lives, and if so, how. So we bring it back to our own lives to make it relevant. And these questions you could have as discussion. You could have students write about these. Okay, so a couple of tips to encourage positive messages in our classroom communication. When students say can't, encourage them to add yet. For example, I can't write an essay. You mean you can't write an essay yet. So it gives some hope. It allows for an opportunity for success, right? It doesn't shut it down. I can't pronounce my L's and R's. I can't pronounce my L's and R's yet. I'm working on it. I need more practice. So just keep that in mind. Let's add yet to the can't, if we must have can't. So when you're working on reading and vocabulary, underline the words you do know. So you have a record of what you know, and it points out the positive elements. And then, of course, as you increase your vocabulary, as you understand more words, you just underline more words, and it grows. It builds on itself. And giving instructions. So next, we're going to take a quick poll about giving instructions. And the question is, if you want students to stop talking, what would you normally say to them? Don't talk, be quiet, or something else. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to the slide. It looks like about half of you would choose be quiet. Let's get here. And again, there are no right or wrong answers. It's your choice. It's really common for people to say, don't talk. Be quiet is probably a more positive message. So think about it. If you tell somebody what not to do, does it give them the information they need to know what to do? It's more clear to state requests positively, and it looks like most of you do that. So you're being clear with your students. So here are some others we can practice with. What about these? Don't be late. What can we say instead of don't be late? Be on time. Come on time. Great example. Try to come early. Sure, why not? Okay. Lots of good examples. Please be on time. That's even nicer, Aslan. Okay, what about don't look? What about this one? How could you say that in positive language? And I guess it depends on what you're asking your students to do. There, close your eyes, right? Close your eyes instead of don't look. Please look here. Yana. Okay, turn your head. There's another way to say it. All right, and then don't fidget. Sit still. Turgan. Right, keep still. Stay focused. Great examples. Relax. It's a nice reminder. Okay, great, nice contributions. So now I want to give you some questions to think about. These questions, what are the benefits of using positive language in the classroom? What do you think about the idea of pointing out strengths rather than weaknesses? And how can these ideas apply to error correction? These questions will also be on the NAME site, so you can refer to them there. So take some time to think about these and any other questions that come up for you. You can talk with friends and colleagues, talk with your students, find out what they think about having a positive environment in the classroom. Any thoughts on these for now? Make students more motivated to learn, Jay. Positive language. Great, motivate. Teresa. Doing some more happy while learning the language. Pointing out strength, positive attitude, all this positivity, it's wonderful. Great. So these questions, again, they'll be on the name. I encourage you really to talk with your colleagues, to think about them, to write if that's a good way for you to process. And again, keep your students in mind. So we have spent some time together today with a focus on being more positive in our lives and in our classroom, especially through language. Now that our time is nearly over, how can we reframe the end to give it a positive twist? What do you think? Go ahead and write in the chat box. How can we reframe the end? Brilliant, to be continued. Nice, and absolutely true. See you in the next session. Okay, that's also true for a lot of us. See you again, a new beginning. Nice. Okay, so here's to new beginnings. I want to thank you so much for your participation. I encourage you to enjoy and stay positive, and really, I appreciate you being here today from all over the world. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will turn it over to Heather.